if you don't really understand how to structure a business and you don't have the confidence to set up your business and use software, I think AI is going to be transformational.
AI knows the business, how you operate and how you do things, how you run your business, when you send bills. All these things start to play into the accounting system, can start to verticalize itself.
With AI now, I actually believe by end of 2026, the month-end close process will be largely automated.
Workflows and processes start to blend into the background. It's very much like the Homer Simpson moving into the bushes meme, where at some point there just isn't going to be a month-end close.
I had always worked on cloud solutions, and so I was hired into Intuit to run the product team for payments. But you could look around the corner and you could see that we didn't yet have a cloud solution. So I decided to make the move and join the desktop team very specifically to try and fund QuickBooks Online.
What will an AI native firm in 2030 look like?
No firm in 2030 should be categorizing a transaction. And if they are, they should be looking very hard at the software they're using.
Nor doing a manual reconciliation.
Yeah, that's gone.
You've been tuned in to AI Native Accounting, powered by Digits, the world's first autonomous general ledger. Unlock automation for bookkeeping, reporting, client collaboration, and more. Let Digits handle the tedium so you can focus on high-impact client services. See why AI Native Accounting starts with Digits. Try it for free today at digits.com.
Welcome to the AI Native Accounting Podcast presented by Digits. My name is Kacee Johnson and I am your host. And today we have a very special episode where we are actually here live in San Francisco. And I'm joined by the trifecta of leadership in tech as well as general ledgers. So first we have Dan Wernikoff, who is currently a board member at Bill, previously CEO of LegalZoom, and prior to that, the general manager and EVP at Intuit. Thank you so much for being here, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Craig Walker, who was previously the CTO at Xero, and then now you are head of product strategy at Digits.
I am. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And then, of course, we have Jeff Seibert, who is the founder and CEO of Digits. And prior to this, also still in tech, founder and CEO of Crashlytics.
Yes, thanks for having me, Kacee.
Oh, this is exciting. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. So I want to start by kind of level setting and understanding your guys' journeys because, Dan, I'll start with you because when I look at the evolution of your career and where you started, I think at Intuit around 2003, you were there till about 2018, somewhere around there. You were there during the thick of creating QBO and educating the profession and getting them to move to the cloud. Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Yes. So I joined in 2003. Prior to that, I'd been in fintech at a couple different places like Schwab and First USA. I had always worked on cloud solutions. So I'd never worked in an organization that had a desktop product. And so I was hired into Intuit to run the product team for payments. So we had a connected services group. And really our main mission was to integrate financial services into the ledger, which was very difficult to do with a desktop product. Yeah. So I did that for about 5 years. We grew our payments business significantly. So it was about $1 million when I joined. It was about $250 million about 4 years later. But you could look around the corner and you could see that we didn't yet have a cloud solution. And there were some upstarts in the market that were starting to make some noise. And I'd worked in payments for a long time and we had been doing things like mobile development, but yet we still had this legacy desktop business, which was the main channel for all of these financial services. So it looked as if our channel was going to disappear. So I decided to make the move and join the desktop team very specifically to try and fund QuickBooks Online. So I joined to run the product organization in 2008. I became the GM in 2010. We immediately started funding QuickBooks Online. We actually were helped out in our funding efforts by Xero. I look back at it now and think like the competition actually got a sense of urgency around the organization. But there were a lot of interesting stories about how you make a transition when you have a very large installed and vocal base, which we did with the QuickBooks desktop product, and trying to move them over to the cloud, which was really a journey that started in 2011, 2012. Yeah. But that's all, now sort of, water under the bridge. And obviously no one really talks as much about the desktop today.
It was at the time though painful to get a lot of those firms to move and let go of with their legacy systems. So, Craig, you were kind of on the flip side of this. You joined Xero around 2006.
So I was one of the co-founders of Xero. So prior to Xero, I was working as kind of a virtual CTO for different entrepreneurs. My other co-founders were running different businesses. One of them was running a chartered accounting firm in New Zealand, and another had just sold a company that he had built to a US-based business. And we kind of got together, and what we hated was the fact that the financials took months for us to understand what our businesses were doing. And a lot of it was because we were shipping data back and forwards. And this is back in the day where you'd ship a USB stick or a CD. The accountant would have to then upload it, make changes. They'd have to send you back that file. Because otherwise your books were out of date. And so it was just so hard to get the financials and so hard to understand the business. And it just made sense to put it online. Why couldn't you just access this in the browser? That was the choice. And it was a good time in 2006. The cloud, browser technology was starting to get to a point where you could actually build an accounting system online. And we just saw this big opportunity to try and move the market and be the first cloud accounting system. It was fun. It was a good time.
And Jeff, during all of this time, you were definitely not in accounting. You've got Crashlytics and Twitter, and talk to us about your journey and why start a general ledger.
Yeah, I was not in accounting. I was in tech. So actually, that was the perfect Web 2.0 moment, right? In 05, 06. I actually started my first company in 2007 in document collaboration. I chose very sexy industries. And so we were working on being able to display files in a web browser, which of course today sounds stupid, but back in 2007 was hard. Yeah. And the ability to mark them up and draw on them, comment on them, etc. So I ended up selling that company to Box. I then started Crashlytics in 2011 in the mobile developer tool space, helping app developers understand what line number of code they needed to fix in their apps. We got very lucky with the market timing, scaled to 300 million phones in 12 months, and ended up getting acquired by Twitter. And then at Twitter, they named me head of product in 2015. So I was in the consumer software space, saw that whole rise. But it was actually that journey of sort of my startups and then at Twitter that got me interested in finance and accounting, because what really struck me was the difference in data quality between product engineering and the business side. And so in Product Eng, you had Google Analytics, you have A/B testing tools, you have Grafana, you have all these live dashboards where you knew exactly what your users were doing, your servers were doing. And on the finance side, you were waiting months. I was waiting 2 to 3 weeks at that point to get a black and white P&L from our accountant. And I was like, why? That's crazy. Why don't I have a real-time finance dashboard? And so that question was basically the founding premise of Digits.
Excellent. So you were still seeing the thick of it, the pain points and everything, just not building necessarily for the profession at the time. So I'd like to talk, I talk with a lot of firms, and one of the fears that I hear over and over and over about security and where is my data going to be, it just rings in my ears of what I heard 15 years ago when I was trying to hawk virtual servers, right? So I'm like, okay, I see a lot of parallels here. Dan, I'm sure that you guys got a lot of that pushback back then. Are you seeing parallels between adoption of AI similar to what we had back then with cloud?
I think there's some similarities, but there's some pretty big differences. There's sort of an existential fear about AI, which I think is a very real one that you have to acknowledge, as people feel as if it may be taking their jobs away. But then there's a lot of practical fears on top of it. And one fear would be that, I've built my whole practice around a specific way of doing work, and now I'm going to have to go back and re-engineer the whole thing, or think about how I restructure how our practice works. There's the fear of new business models. I mean, when we built QuickBooks Online, people forget this, but there wasn't really a ratable business model for software. I mean, it was an outright purchase with a sunset model. And I think accountants, they used to be skeptical. I don't know if they are anymore. I'm sure now they're super positive and always thinking about the bright side. But they used to be super skeptical about anything that had to do with the business model shift because, at times they've been taken advantage of. And so I think they look at AI and think, what's going to happen here? You're going to change the experience. I'm going to have to explain it to customers. You're probably going to change the pricing. You're going to take advantage of that situation at times and think about how you can grow your business as a service provider to the accounting industry. And I'm going to be the one trying to figure this all out. Then you layer on top of that the security concerns, which is like another level because it's less clear what model is being used, how the data is being shared. And I think it's a very confusing time for people.
Probably just all goes back, though, to transparency and education, right? To help alleviate some of those fears.
It's very similar, the kinds of conversations that we would have with accountants, 15 years ago, similar conversations that you'd have today. I think what's the flip side actually is the opportunity space. So one of the things that we saw, and this was we started New Zealand and our first big markets were Australia and the UK, but we saw this opportunity where there were accountants and firms that were languishing, and we're really looking at the likes of Xero, both in terms of, what is this going to do to my job, but also in terms of, actually, this is an opportunity to do my job better or do my job differently. And so there was a business model change because we were going from, you'd pay $100 for a desktop software to paying, $50 a month. But that was an opportunity, a step change that they were able to take to market. And one of the things I'm most proud of is the kinds of firms that started because of Xero, because there was a fundamental change in the way the software was packaged and delivered that firms took advantage of. And so I think, and I feel like I'm seeing this at Digits right now, there is a fervor around AI that there's firms that actually see that as an opportunity. And so that fear is there and it's real, but there's also, a big opportunity that sits there as well.
Yeah, there's almost a divergence of like the new practices, a little bit more tech forward practices, and the ones that are just very stable. And I remember when really started to make a move in the US, we weren't as concerned about the product functionality that they were releasing. I
won't take that personally.
It was much more about the business model, value-based pricing for a firm. You were doing some sort of a lot of bulk discounts. You were really being aggressive and trying to align with the firm. The fact that you didn't have all the functionality almost worked to the benefit of you because the end clients weren't stuck with bloatware. They kind of had a very simple experience that they had to use, and the accountants were really relied on to be the glue. And so that business model shift, if you lean into it, created, I'm sure, a ton of firms that just really understood technology and wanted to push hard.
And I'm curious, Craig, because you guys came over after it was very established, obviously, in both Australia and New Zealand. And when you came over to the US market and you had the 800-pound gorilla, right, of Intuit to try to, have some market penetration, I was actually having a conversation earlier today with the Digits team about the excitement that you guys kind of brought to all of the conferences. What did you see as the response from those US firms that, and by the way, they still are the same, very like either progressive and early adopters and excited, or else stable, to your word. What was your guys' impression?
So, candidly, I think when we came to the US, so what had happened in Australia and the UK was that there were incumbent gorillas there as well. So MYOB in Australia, you probably remember, Sage in the UK, but neither of those businesses could pivot. They couldn't move. MYOB went through a whole process of trying to cloudify their desktop products. So it was a desktop product sitting over the cloud.
Sadly, we did that as well.
Which is
that's a whole phase.
Which is kind of natural because you're wanting to keep your cash cow, and so you lean into that. But obviously, that's a failure. And so when we came to the US, I think there was a natural thought that Intuit would kind of roll over, and the opposite was true. It was almost like Intuit were waiting for us and then kind of flicked a switch. But essentially, it was the same thing that we're seeing with digits. Firms were interested in something that was new. They liked the way that we were very firm forward, really thinking about leaning into the profession and really trying to boost the profession. And so I think, what we got from that was a lot of firms that were just really interested in buying what Xero was selling, just around how we could move the profession forward. And so I think that was a differentiation with where Intuit was going. But it's been a hard slog for Xero in the US.
By the way, I really do feel like that's such a good summary. Like, I think we had lost our way with accountants. And you guys reminded us that they were sort of the heart and soul of the small business ecosystem. And to our credit, we reacted very quickly to it and reoriented and went back to really serving accountants. But it's a good lesson for anybody jumping in today that's always an opportunity to overserve accountants. They are just the most important people in the ecosystem of small businesses. There's bar none. But everybody forgets that at different times.
Yeah. 100%
we could
agree.
do a whole podcast about that.
It could not have been better put.
Yeah.
So, Craig, I am curious because we've talked a lot about the parallels. What makes AI not the next cloud? Where do those comparisons start to fall apart?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's nice to think of AI as being the next cloud, but that's really missing the fundamental point. Because really, what the cloud was about was where the software was and how it was delivered. AI is a fundamental shift in the way you work. It's a change of operating model, and so like with when I think back to what we did with the cloud. Like it really was putting a desktop accounting system into a browser. And the innovation was actually more around the fact that we applied design to it. Xero had at the beginning of Xero, we had as many designers as we had engineers. Like we leaned heavily into that. But even though like the workflows were more tuned, they were nicer to interact with, it ultimately was a traditional software system just with rounded buttons. While AI is actually a fundamental change in the way you work. If cloud was data leaving the four walls of a firm, AI is judgment leaving the four walls of the firm, and that's quite a fundamental change. So it really is around no longer you doing the work, the software is doing the work, and so that's going to change the way that you have to think about interacting with the software. Choosing when the software should finish something, when you should be involved in it. It's quite a different fundamental change in just work. I always like to think of B2B software. I've said this before. My vision for B2B software is that it is the best employee you can ever have. But cloud was basically putting the ledger in a browser. AI is making a ledger a coworker. And so for the first time, I actually feel like I can deliver on my own vision for what I want software to be.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it is. I like that from a builder. Yeah,
I do think it's successful. The shift has happened though when it does then lead to a different interface or platform that you're sort of engaging with AI on. And I do think at some point we'll see a move from the browser to voice or something that's going to be really a demonstration of the power of AI, but it's not there yet. But it's interesting. You guys, you hit it a little bit on the browser side. Like today, you're seeing people almost create a third appendage to their software. It's like the third arm, and you're like, how do I use that third arm? I don't know. I only need two to pick something up. At some point, someone's going to create a UI that's super meaningful and makes it easier to understand what you're using.
I mean, this is what we're working on. Yeah. I think most software has bolted on AI. Yeah. And that's why you have this proliferation of chatbots. And it's like, I don't need another thing to talk to. I have plenty of things to talk to. I just want it to do the work. Yeah. And what's so nice about accounting is the month-end close process is a known process. Yeah. I shouldn't need to tell it each month, please go close my books, right? The software just knows the books need to be closed. The AI's mindset is now the books are closing, right? Like you don't need to go and start this process. It is just happening. And by the way, here is where I need your help. And so the AI, in our vision, shouldn't be a thing that sticks out of the product. It should be underneath the product, just doing it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's foundational.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like you had features back in QuickBooks that said this is a cloud feature and this was a core feature, and it had iconography against it. I mean, it was just like it became a cloud application.
Yeah.
So Jeff, how does that change the practitioner role and the firm role when the general ledger itself is intelligent?
Yeah, I think this is going to be the major transformation for the profession is, I mean, not to be mean, but for cloud and desktop, the workflow was largely similar. Like you still had to go and do the functions. You had to use the software. With AI now, I actually believe by end of next year, end of 2026, the month-end close process will be largely automated. And so from booking all the transactions, that already works. We're at 96+%, to auto-reconciling the bank statements, like fully magically just by dropping the PDF on. From managing the schedules, the work papers, fixed assets, depreciations, et cetera, to doing the transaction review with the clients and getting the extra context you need, the receipts you need to book the transaction, to the variance analysis, flux analysis, anomaly detection. Like you can actually talk through the entire thing. By end of next year, that will be largely automated. And so from then, it's really transitioning the firm from doing all the preparation of the work to focusing on reviewing the work and communicating it to the client.
Yeah, workflows and processes start to blend into the background. It's very much like the Homer Simpson moving into the bushes meme, where at some point there just isn't going to be a month-end close. Now, there will be a function of it, but that will be an implementation detail. It will just be something that happens in the background. Now, one of the things I love about digits, there's lots of moving parts to digits that are quite opaque, and that's kind of by design. One of the cool features that we have is our party hydrator, and I particularly like it as an example here. So when when we find a transaction that we haven't seen before, we will do what say a junior staff accountant will do. We'll look at the vendor and we'll Google it. We have an agent that literally Googles for vendors and hydrates information about that party, so that then we can feed that to an LLM to figure out what it should be categorized as. That's work that was previously done by someone that is now just done. It's working 24/7. It's just there, but it's opaque to the user. It's just a process that we've automated in the background, and more of the stuff is just going to move into the background. And what's going to have to come into the foreground is actually reviewing, it's having conversations with your client, it's actually doing meaningful reporting, helping small businesses to grow and thrive, as opposed to just spending time prepping books.
And it makes the finances come alive, because you see Airbnb's logo when you book an Airbnb. You see their contact support email address. You see their website. That would be the stuff that's way too tedious for a human accountant to go and compile your full vendor directory for every vendor you use. But the agent just does it 24/7. And so as you browse the product, you see all the vendors' logos that you interact with, and you see your customers' faces. It's like, that's cool.
It almost feels like a consumer app that we're all being trained. It's so funny to me when people are like, oh no, I don't know if I'm ready to move to AI in my life. And I'm like, if you have a smartphone, AI is in your life, whether you know it or not. But what you're describing almost sounds like an interface that we're just naturally seeing pop up in our consumer life. So why wouldn't it in business?
Well, that I think is the goal, is the frontier, is can you build accounting software as if Apple built it? And Apple, of course, will never enter the space. But when you have that mindset, can you achieve an elegance and a minimalism and an experience that just is immediately intuitive to business owners.
And delights.
Exactly.
So your call is Apple won't. Will Amazon?
Build front-end accounting software for businesses? Unlikely. No. Yeah.
All right. So I have a question for all of you guys as builders. Was there ever a feature or a part of the product that you look at as like the one that got away, that never came to fruition, that you wish would have?
I mean, I can start.
Sure.
So if you know Xero, and a lot of the audience for this podcast will know Xero, it doesn't really have, well, I think it does now, but it never really had this concept of a true bank reconciliation. It really had this idea of kind of, it fed in data from the bank feed, and then it fed in data from the relational database, and then it gave you a workbench that you could work through to enable you to pump data into the system. And I remember, it would have been 7 odd years ago, I remember going to Wellington and sitting with a team and saying, we should have a project of no bank rec. Like this should just all be automated. Like the data, we have the data. Why can't we just auto categorize everything? And it was one of the things that I was thinking about last year when I serendipitously met Jeff. It was like, oh, you guys are doing it. Cool. We should do something. But ironically, Digits is doing exactly what I really wanted to do with that feature, because I built that feature in 2007. That was a lot of my love and time and code was building that thing, and seeing it 12 years on in like 2018 or whatever, not having evolved at all. It really hadn't. Was sad, and it's nice to actually be able to see the realization of what ultimately was, I thought, the dream that we're building towards. So yeah.
Bank recs. Dan?
I feel like we had so many debates in the initial release of QuickBooks Online, which was called the Harmony release. I don't know if anybody remembers it. It was kind of like that. I remember that. Yeah, one of the paradigms we wanted to shift to was being a little bit more mid-office, and so we came up with the concept of a business feed. There is a feed now in QuickBooks Online, but it's a little bit different. The business feed, as we thought about it, was more of linking to external data about the business. So if you got a customer complaint, or if you saw a business that was like you could link to them. You could start to ask questions and message to it. So it was a little bit like a precursor for Instagram, but very specific to small businesses. And the team was like, that's the dumbest thing ever. We have to build accounting, because we just had so much to do just to sort of, because the original version of QuickBooks Online was forked version of the desktop. We had to continue to like decouple and break up the monolith and create different UI on top of it, and still with existing customers. So everybody said, let's just stay in our lane. But it would have been awesome.
Xero had the same idea.
Did you?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's such an obvious
and everyone in them was like, it's a stupid idea. We should focus on accounting.
Yeah. Someone out there is going to do it at some point, become the social network for very specifically for businesses. And we all know that businesses all feel lonely, don't know if they're doing the things the right way. That's why they love accountants. Their accountants are like, no, you're normal. You're doing this okay. Like, trust yourself. But they need a network of people who support them.
You guys might have just given one of our audience members a new business idea.
That would be awesome.
There you go.
Yeah,
I hope so.
Awesome.
Jeff, what's the one that got away?
Yeah, I mean, so we have not been able to build this yet, but we've been talking about it for years, and I'm hoping we do get to it. But budgeting is such a pain point for every small business owner. And as you talk with small business owners, most small business owners actually can't afford a budget, because they can't afford to pay their accountant for the hours it would take to create the budget. And then creating it's one thing, but then you have to maintain it every month, and of course tie it to actuals and so on. So it's a nightmare. What I want is, I don't want to have to go create a budget. I just want the software to give me a budget. And so, because it knows my historical spend, just take that spend, convert it to a budget, and then let me adjust it as I want to. And so imagine in Digits, you just are given a budget for next month, and you're like, oh, I'm going to increase my marketing spend, or I'm going to hire 2 more people, or I'm going to buy another truck, or whatever it is. And imagine sliders where I can just drag up the marketing spend and drag up my number of trucks and so on. And then it just adjusts the budget and projects that forward. And so I think it obviously wouldn't solve the requirements for every company. It would be for smaller businesses, but you could make such a delightful, just like fully automatic budgeting feature that then is just auto tied to the financials every month.
Hopefully you didn't just give that idea to a competitor.
That's, if they build it, great. I mean, I think that would be so cool.
So I want to talk a little bit about, we talked security as being a fear and a blocker to move to the cloud. Trust is obviously aligned with that. This is a profession that anchors itself in trust. We see with all technology, it goes through its maturity curve, and you can literally align it with how users adopt. And we've got laggards who are really waiting until those desktop products are sunset, right? And then we've got the early adopters, the firms who are super progressive and lean in early and don't mind if it's not perfect. With those firms, how do they balance adopting AI boldly but not eroding their clients' trust? Maybe Jeff, if you want.
Yeah, so I would say you need to be very intentional with, obviously, the vendors you select. Look at what they're doing, what data is being used, what model types are being used, because ultimately your client's trust is the single most important thing. I would also say, though, that from what we've seen, the clients are way ahead of the game. They all want modern software. They want real-time financials. They want sort of the promise of what AI can help you deliver. And so it's funny when firms say, oh, my clients aren't ready for this. I think the clients likely are ready for this. They're playing with ChatGPT already. It's one of the fastest growing products of all time. And so it's more getting the firm on board on just like how to do the process management, change management, to try this out with a set of clients and then roll it out more broadly. If you have the discipline of sort of selecting vendors that are responsible and trustworthy, and then I think going full speed ahead with experimentation, I think you'll strike the right balance.
Yeah, I think I do. I also agree. I think clients are ready for it because they're seeing the consumer products. I think that the challenge might be that they trust those products a little too much. And in the case of your finances, there's sort of a trust but verify that needs to be there. And I think, whoever, this goes back to the UI discussion, whoever gets really good at unpacking how an answer comes to you through AI and does that in a very simple interface so that someone could almost, it's like, accountants love audit. Like audit is a feature, is a great feature. Why wouldn't you go back and audit, like source why you gave me that answer and just make it very simple for me to deconstruct how we came to the conclusion.
So this is such an important point. This goes down to the types of models used. So LLMs, large language models, can hallucinate. Like they are by their very nature non-deterministic. Accounting, you don't want that, right? Accounting is not a generative problem space. Accounting is a predictive problem space. You want to reliably book the transaction the same way each month. And so at Digits, we've spent over 5 years training our own domain-specific predictive models. It is impossible for them to hallucinate, and they can get extremely accurate because we train the models on each individual business. And so once your business has seen a transaction, they will be effectively perfect at booking it every month going forward. In the product, you can also click on the transaction and we show you the similar transactions that the model based its prediction on. So it's actually very easy to sort of audit and see, oh, of course it put it there because of these similar transactions that were previously there. So I agree with you. I think really focusing on the UI and communicating what the model is doing is key.
That's it's just a confidence play. I think if you ask two clients and you showed them two different solutions and said which one's right, they wouldn't be able to unpack anything that you just said. They literally will have to verify it some way and be able to kind of go back into an audit trail that says this is why this happened. So I do think it's a UI challenge on top of just being a model challenge.
Totally.
Yeah.
To your point, though, on confidence, so, everybody's got different claims. What is an acceptable accuracy percentage that they should be looking at from their vendors?
So we've done extensive benchmarking on this. What's really interesting is across all the LLMs, we've tested obviously OpenAI, Anthropic, the Chinese models, everything that's come out. They're all plateauing around 70% accuracy in bookkeeping and taking a transaction and booking it to the chart of accounts, which honestly is not great. And GPT-5 just came out this summer. It cracked it. It's 71% accurate. They gained 1%. What's interesting is we ran those same benchmarks with outsourced human accountants. We're like, okay, wait, how do humans do it this same data set? And it was fascinating, only 79% accurate. And the reason is, once you step back and think about it, it actually makes sense. An outsourced human accountant also doesn't have context, right? They don't know that specific business. They don't know that industry. They don't know that geo. And so they're working on their sort of general accounting knowledge to do those books. That's what LLMs are doing, right? They're trained on the entire internet and the general accounting knowledge. They also don't have that specific context. So what that tells me is it's actually the LLMs are approaching the accuracy of an outsourced human team far faster than you might expect. But that's obviously a far cry from your dedicated, trusted accountant that knows your business. And they're way up in the very high 90% accurate. That is what we're seeing with our models. We're now above 96% because, again, they're trained on each individual business and they're predictive. They're not hallucinating. So I would really push vendors that you're talking to on what their accuracy rates are. And you want something well above 90%. Otherwise, you're going to be doing a lot of review work and corrections. But also be very skeptical if the vendor's like, oh, our model's 100% accurate or our model's 99.99% accurate. That's likely wrong.
I think the other layer of this is tricky though, is you have new users, people who are getting started, and essentially like your model will probably be a leap forward for, you know, just getting started and setting up your business properly, categorizing, getting your chart of accounts, doing all that, you know, sort of from a de novo standpoint. Switching is like a different pain point, right? If you have a process, if you've defined a lot of rules, I think QuickBooks is probably thinking about this a lot right now as they roll out their AI products, and it's almost wiping out some of that work, and then they have to rebuild confidence in the numbers again. And so there is like, it gets really nuanced, right? Like if you're an existing customer who has an existing process, an existing firm, that's can be confusing. And that moment of truth is, how do you get them confident that it's learning or it's doing it better than the prior process was? It's hard to prove.
It is very hard to prove. Yeah, I would say this may be a hot take, but I think rules are obsolete. Yeah. Because what we've seen is if you feed these models 3 to 6 months of historical data, they will mimic it almost perfectly. And they don't need your rules, right? The model implicitly learns the pattern of that business.
I believe that, but for a lot of simple businesses, rules kind of do it good enough, right?
For sure.
If you have 100 transactions, you're at 95% success on your rules. 5 transactions get queued, you've got to review them. It's not the end of the world. So that's the bar. Like, I think at an enterprise level, these make massive differences, but small businesses, they're a little bit more, you know, they kind of are willing to sort of have things be a little bit more loose.
So what would flip the small business? What's the value add for the small business? It's like, oh, we have to adopt something new.
I think it's new users. I mean, if you don't really understand how to structure a business and you don't have the confidence to set up your business and use software, I think AI is going to be transformational.
Yep.
Like, you're leveraging all of the knowledge of all of the businesses that have been created in the past, all the transactions that have been reviewed by other people, and so it just like leaps you forward. I think switchers are going to be a little bit. I mean, I've been through switchers my whole life, and you just if you've built your firm around something, if you've built your business around something, if it kind of works as is, when you layer in new capabilities, it's usually a couple steps back. And those can be super painful, and how you manage that process is really important, because it's an erosion of trust, and then you have to rebuild the trust.
I think the point on like new businesses, but potentially existing businesses as well, but the idea of what AI can do in terms of like verticalized solutions. So like a lot of well, basically the ledgers now are kind of generic solutions, kind of generic small business. And if you are construction or whatever, you'll bolt on something, right? So there will be a line of business app that you're paying for that's integrating into the ledger because they didn't want to build their own ledger. And so that's how you build your accounting system for your particular vertical, is that it's plug and play of a bunch of different things. I think what's interesting with AI and where the intelligence piece can come in is that the software can start to augment itself based on, this is the thing, right? With whether it's QuickBooks or Xero, it has all the data. It knows the name of the business. It knows some data about the business. It actually doesn't know the business. AI knows the business. So it actually knows what kind of business you are and how you operate and how you do things, how you run your business, when you send bills, how you like to be paid. Like, all these things start to play into the accounting system can start to verticalize itself because the AI is intelligent enough to understand this is a construction business, this is how it needs to operate. I think that's really interesting. Like, we're not there yet, but I think that's an interesting kind of part of the AI story as we build that intelligence, because AI can get niche-y in a way that traditional software couldn't.
It builds on your point earlier about the opportunities that this technology is presenting. It's just the the lens of the user and how they want to look at it, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about, obviously it's AI native accounting podcast. We've done a lot of research, and one of our predictions is that there's going to be AI native firms, and 2030 may sound far away, but we're almost to 2022. It's like 4 years away. I'd love for each of you to kind of give a prediction. I mean, what will an AI native firm in 2030 look like and operate like and be producing for their clients?
I can tell you this much: they should not, no firm in 2030 should be categorizing a transaction. And if they are, they should be looking very hard at the software they're using.
Nor doing a manual reconciliation.
Yeah, that's gone. I think talking to clients more, like actually having real relationships with their clients. And so I think, we've talked about CAS being a big, advisory services being a big part of the accounting profession change over the last 10 years. I think, part of that was the cloud helped enable that. I think AI really turns that on its head, and really, I think will drive firms that way. And so I think it's a lot more about storytelling. And so they'll move from preparers to storytellers.
It's a totally different skill set.
I know.
Dan, what's your crystal?
I mean, definitely agree with that. I'd say the other thing that is probably going to happen, and it already happens today. I mean, the accountant is the business partner. And what we're talking about is really a complex set of tools and platforms. And I think, in some ways, the accountant and the practice has to become the IT department. And I don't mean that in a stodgy old way. I just mean it's sort of, you come with a set of applications, you come with tools, you come with the know-how to sort of link context to those tools. You're there to help make decisions around how you interact with other applications. And all of that is sort of the stitching that then allows you to elevate above and really provide advice. And become more of a CFO than what has been a traditional accountant. But I do think that most small businesses, and I still think everybody kind of, when they think about small businesses, they're probably thinking bigger than I am. I'm into the 5 employees or less businesses. They have nothing. They have no one to work with, and like these firms know all of the right solutions to be using. And, if you find the right firm that's really on the frontier and, is thinking forward, I think you just end up in a better spot. You're going to have better insights from that firm based off of the technology decisions they're helping you make.
Yeah, I shared this actually in sort of our original pitch when we started the company. Every small business, and I agree, like the 5-person small businesses, deserves a Fortune 500 finance team. They obviously can't pay for it, right? How can you give them that benefit? And so as a firm, if all of the tedium is handled for you, then what they want help with is actually operating the business, right? Like managing payroll, bills, et cetera, et cetera. They want help with the sort of management strategy of like, what could I do to grow the business faster? And they want just the like advice and real-time information and so on. And so my framing to firms would be like, you can be a true business partner, which I know the profession has been telling this story, but in my personal experience over the course of 3 businesses, I've never gotten that benefit from my accountant, and I don't blame them because they're spending all of their time closing the books. And so I think this finally enables the actual worldview that the profession's been chasing.
So I want to do a quick lightning round with you gentlemen. First, if I'm going to assign you a ledger, was an emoji, what would it be? So Craig, you're going to get 0, Dan, QuickBooks, and Jeff digits. So what emoji is 0? I'm
going to be boring. It's going to be the cloud emoji.
All right.
That was super boring. I'm removed enough from QuickBooks and have a massive amount of respect for that organization. It's unbelievable. Since I've left, it's been 10x of when I was there. I would say jazz hands, a little jazz hands, because at this point, I think it has to be all things for all people, which becomes really difficult. Right? You're sort of solving for all types of constituents at massive scale. And so there's a lot of balancing that has to happen.
We are the rocket ship emoji. If you look at our Slack, we have rocket ships everywhere. We actually customize the emoji so it's bright digits green in our Slack. But the reason is that was why I wanted to start the company, was to give these small business owners, these startup founders, real-time financials. Because when you're running your business, you can't afford to wait until the month ends or 3 weeks after that to get the data to then decide to change the business, right? Like, I need the decision in the moment as I'm running the business day to day. And so that's sort of a core belief of mine, that if you offer real-time financials, which now with AI is possible, you can actually guide your business in the moment and grow it far faster than you could if you're waiting sort of on a month-by-month or quarterly cycle.
I feel like this says a lot about the personality of the products. This is fun. Okay. Now tell me an AI solution that you personally use, nothing to do with business, but that you can't imagine your life without.
I'm gonna go boring again. Like, I religiously use ChatGPT.
Okay.
I have replaced Google with it, because like it answers things better than Google does nowadays. But being able to actually have a conversation with it when I'm trying to figure something out is massively powerful. And so, I'm not just talking for business uses, for personal use. I'll ask it all sorts of random questions, how to cook things, how to do certain things around the house. Like, I'm using that as the starting point for how I navigate the web in a way that I was doing with Google 5 years ago. It's kind of amazing, actually.
Yeah, I've got to be boring as well, because it's incredible. I toggle between ChatGPT and Gemini, and part of it is, you still have to be so careful, right? You ask the same question 4 times, you're going to get 4 different answers, and so that's something to keep in mind. But the level of the results they get better and better. And if you get better and better at prompting, like you actually start to see a refinement in the answers. I'm starting to play with Replit as well, and some of the prompt coding tools, which are fascinating to use if you're non-technical. I've been able to spin up websites pretty quickly and just kind of play with them, and I can imagine how powerful that's going to be in the next 6 months. So I'd say that's more on the frontier for me.
I have to go with Whisper. WISPR completely changed my life. It is effectively perfect voice dictation. And so I don't type anymore. I voice dictate all my emails, all my Slacks. I dictated our board doc. It is incredible because you can talk and it prints exactly what you say, and it obviously corrects your grammar, and it formats it correctly and puts periods and capitalizes and so on. And I can speak at 200 words a minute, and I can't type at 200 words a minute. And so it saves so much time. So yeah, highly recommend.
It's a good one.
This was a fascinating conversation. I appreciate you guys, not just for taking the time to have this conversation, but for your leadership in these transformative companies over the years. So thank you. Thank you to our audience for tuning in to this episode of the AI Native Accounting Podcast. If you would like to become an AI Native firm, please visit digits.com and check out YouTube, as well as all of your favorite podcast platforms for all of our episodes, as well as future releases. With that, I'll leave you with stay curious and stay ahead. Thank you.
You've been tuned in to AI Native Accounting, powered by Digits, the world's first autonomous general ledger. Unlock automation for bookkeeping, reporting, client collaboration, and more. Let Digits handle the tedium so you can focus on high-impact client services. See why AI Native Accounting starts with Digits. Try it for free today at digits.com.